Previously in Star Citizen, if you wanted to get started with ship mining, you really had one and only one choice, MISC Prospector. But now with the introduction of the Drake Golem, things have really changed. Stay tuned and I'll dive into it. Prior to 4.1, if you were into the industrial gameplay, you probably had a MISC Prospector. It was kind of the solo go-to mining starter ship, but it was really where people started and ended. With the introduction of the Drake Golem, however, things have drastically changed in this realm. So let's break it down and find out exactly why and see exactly how the two ships compare. Both ships, the Drake Golem and the MISC Prospector, really stay true to their manufacturer when it comes to the design. So the MISC Prospector really has kind of that industrial feel, but it's more of a modern industrial feel with all of the amenities that you could possibly need as a solo player out on the verse. And it's really kind of a nice, rounded, complete, refined ship. Drake Golem, however, is really more of a junkyard special, for lack of better words, but that truly is kind of key to the Drake manufacturer. It's almost like they saw the MISC Prospector and said, we can do better for cheaper. And that's exactly what they did. So when you look at the design, you see the wires that are hanging out, you see the open moving parts. It really gives a rough kind of feel to it, which is exactly what the Drake manufacturer is. So as we jump into the cockpit view, the MISC Prospector really has the best visibility out of the game. You can see anything in every direction, almost. Now, comparing that directly off to the Golem actually still has really good visibility, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily as good as the Prospector. But I'm still a fan of it. I mean, none of the things that are in the ship actually really kind of get in your way, which is really nice. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like you're sitting in a bubble. So as we move to the interior features, this is where the two ships really do differ. So the Prospector has all of the amenities that you would need. It's got a bed. It's actually got an interior, first off. But it's got a bed, it's got a water machine, bathroom. Again, really everything that you would actually need within the ship. Compare that to the Golem, it's got a seat. So one of the biggest problems, and really the only real disadvantage that I find today in the Golem, is if you want to drink, you really can't. You have to get out of your ship to drink. And the problem is that not all of the places that you're going to go mining allow you to get out of the ship and drink. In fact, most of the places that you're going to go mining don't. They don't have an atmosphere that supports taking your helmet off. That really means that you're going to have to fly back to a space station if you're out of water just to drink. That's a major strike against the Golem to me. Now, to counter that exact point, however, both the Prospector and the Golem really don't have enough storage to justify a super long quantum flight in order to get to your minables. So I don't think it's really that big of a deal as long as you plan it correctly. As long as anytime you're under 50%, you drink before you leave. But when you inevitably do forget, it does get a little bit annoying. Another real notable difference between the two is the mining laser itself. So the mining laser in the Golem cannot be changed, however the one in the Prospector can. That being said, right now I've never actually changed the mining laser in my Prospector. I've never really seen a need to. You can still equip the gadgets and the components. So really all of the customization that you need to do, you can really do to both of them. But if you wanted to pull the head off, you can't in the Golem and you can in the Prospector. Now, as it stands in release 4.1 today, the Golem does have one slight advantage over the Prospector in the sense that you actually do have a storage place to put whatever you happen to find. You also have a utility storage, so you can put a tractor beam in there, and you also have a rifle storage, so you can actually store your rifle in the ship itself. Now, the Prospector doesn't currently have that, but I'm sure when they go and do a refinement on it prior to those actually being needed, I'm sure the Prospector will actually get that. Moving on to the performance and capabilities category on my comparison here, two ships are actually very close. Both of them offer a 32 SCU storage capability. And again, this is in 4.1, and I'll explain what that means in a second, but both offer a 32 SCU storage capability. Now, the Golem is actually a little bit faster, coming in at 202 SCM versus a Prospector's 156 SCM. meaning you have about a 25% speed advantage when you're using the Golem. That can come in handy if you're trying to run away from somebody or if you're really just trying to find your next thing to actually mine. So the reason that I said I would come back to the cargo space is it is notable that the Prospector has detachable saddlebags, and by default it actually has a collapsed saddlebag in the top. I suspect once that gameplay actually releases, the Prospector will be able to eject the saddlebags and expand the next one, actually giving it 64 SCU total when the time comes. The same thing doesn't actually exist on the Golem because the way that the ore is actually stored, it's in kind of a nice or a hard container, not really an expandable container. So I suspect as time goes on and that feature is actually brought into the verse, that the Prospector will win out based on the amount of storage it's actually capable of holding. Now today there is a little bit of a hack, so you can actually, I believe it's double the size of the Prospector bags and actually keep the 64 SCU. Not everybody does that, and it really is using an exploit in the game, in all fairness. So just a little bit of a talk about maneuverability. Both ships are very easy to maneuver. I find the Prospector a little bit easier to fly, simply because it's actually a little bit less maneuverable. But the Golem, because of its size, you can maneuver that thing very, very easily, and it fits in some really small spaces when you're dealing in asteroid fields or whatever else you happen to get it into. That can be a real advantage over the Prospector, as the Prospector does feel a little bit long. Just quickly comparing the stats, the Prospector is actually about 40% longer than the Golem, which is significant when you're trying to fly around in tight spaces. As we move over into the component section of the comparison here, this is another place that you actually get some significant difference. So the Prospector comes with a medium power plant, medium cooler, 3 small shield generators, and a small quantum fuel tank. When you compare that to the Golem, it actually comes with one small of every one of those. So having the 3 shield generators actually does give you significantly more protection in the Prospector over the Golem. Having the additional coolers will probably come in handy as time goes on and coolers actually do something. And the additional power plants do give you a little bit of extra wiggle room for increasing the power of your engines, for instance. So the Prospector definitely does win this category. Now, as you start to move into the weapons, however, both ships have 2 size 1 weapons. The main difference is the Golem actually has 2 size 1 missiles. Now, a size 1 missile isn't really going to do much against most ships, but having the missile lock on an enemy is probably more intimidating than anything else. So I do see a place for the missiles, even if you never fire them. Both ships also include a mining laser on it. Now, the Prospector's is removable, so you could theoretically swap it out if you wanted to, and the Golem's is not. So they are roughly equivalent, I would say, but I found in my testing that the Golem, I seem to stumble across a lot more rocks that I just simply couldn't break up. Maybe that was coincidental, I'm not really 100% sure, but it seemed like the Prospector had a wider range of rocks that it actually could break up. Now, the other thing is there is some trickery with the Golem. It really increases the resistance on the rocks, I believe it is. So it stands to reason that some of them are going to be impossible that the Prospector could actually destroy. This is one of those areas that honestly I think I can see CIG tweaking as time goes on. I like some of the suggestions from the community where what they're suggesting is that in the Golem would simply be less effective. So if you had a 1 SCU, maybe it pulls in 80% of that, whereas the Prospector would pull in the full 100%. It doesn't really make sense to me, and most of the community it seems, to have what is a starter ship of a higher resistance and instability on the rocks that it mines, which essentially makes mining harder. It doesn't make sense to have a starter with harder rocks or having a harder time to actually break the rocks. Well, I can see the efficiency being a lever that they might want to tweak in the future. So this is one of those things that we might want to keep an eye on as time goes on. Another thing that might be important to some people is the liveries that are available on both of the ships. The Prospector at the time of recording has 10 different liveries that are available for it, and the Golem only has 5. That being said, this does tend to change quite often, I find, so that could be in flux by the time that you're watching this video. So the final category I want to talk about is actually the cost and the value. A little bit of a tricky comparison right now because the Golem is not available to purchase in game, so it's not a true comparison. But using the store price, there's really no comparison anyway. Prospector currently sells for 155 USD, and the Golem sells for 60 USD. You're not using the war bond. 55 if you are. Now in that case, the Prospector is almost 3 times more expensive than the Golem. When you compare that they largely are the same ship capable of the same mining duties, generally anyway, there's no comparison. If I were purchasing this outright, there's really no reason for me to ever buy the Prospector. And the only reason that I'm holding on to the Prospector is that's the ship that it's the second ship that I ever bought. But yes, I'm justifying the additional $100 to not mount my Prospector and purchase a Golem on something else just by personal preference. But I have the oddest feeling that I might be special in that regard, and I can't see a lot of players starting out in the verse ever really considering the Prospector anymore. The Golem has really changed the ship starter market. I can see people starting with the Golem, purchasing the Prospector in game, and then ultimately upgrading to a mole as time goes on. But it really has changed where the Prospector sits, because again, there's no comparison in this price. And if anything, it really shows and highlights how the Prospector is a little bit overpriced and kind of priced at the point where maybe once all of the things are in game, it would make sense. But today it just doesn't make sense anymore. This brings us to the conclusion of our comparison here. So when would I buy? Well, I believe that a Golem is a really great starter ship, and honestly the starter package that's out right now, as the time of recording of this video anyway, is a great value. I strongly suggest anyone looking to join the verse actually purchase that as their starter ship. You can always upgrade it, but it comes with lifetime insurance and 20,000 Alpha UEC, which is not something you often find in a starter package. So I think anybody starting in the verse should really consider the Golem. Now, when would I buy a Prospector? To me, the Prospector is a ship that you upgrade to. Something that once you're familiar with mining, you want to make your life a little bit easier with the easier mining capabilities, but you don't want to go full out mole. Now, yes, it does mean that you're going to be paying roughly 2.9 million credits in game for the convenience of a bed and a bit of an interior, but I still think it's worth it. I really do like my Prospector, and again, that's why I plan on keeping my Prospector. So it's definitely worth the value, but I think it's become more of an in-game purchase than really an in-real-life purchase. So there you have it. If you're considering purchasing the Drake Golem starter package, I've put my referral code in the top of the description of this video. It's a nice way to actually make sure that you get a couple extra credits and potentially a bonus depending on when you sign up for the game. All you got to do is click on the link and then sign up as you normally would. It's all on CIG's website. Now, if you're interested in a more in-depth review of the Drake Golem, I do have a separate video right here that I'll link in as well, just so you know exactly what you're really getting into, but it's a pretty solid ship that I would highly recommend. Thank you, and I hope to see you in the verse.